Once upon a time, in the prosperous Kingdom of Ngolo, King Adago ruled his people with love, honesty, and wisdom. The kingdom flourished under his reign, for he was a man who sought wisdom in the traditions of the ancestors while embracing justice for his people. His wife, Queen Aroko, was known for her beauty, wisdom, and deep love for her only son, Prince Ibuna, who was only 4 years old. The boy was her pride and her joy. He is the heir to the throne and the future of the kingdom. One fateful season, a mysterious illness gripped the young prince, leaving him pale and bedridden. The palace doctors tried every remedy, herbs, potions, and prayers, but nothing worked, and the once lively palace grew heavy with sadness. In Ngolo, there were two laws, as ancient as the mountains and as fearful as a dark night. Firstly, no one should spill blood within the secret grove of Omododo, and secondly, no one should touch the forbidden leaf except the chief priest. Breaking these laws were considered a sacrilege, and the punishment was severe. Every member of the offender's bloodline would be wiped from existence. These were laws passed down through generations, laws that kept the gods appeased and the kingdom in balance. One day, King Adago ventured into the secret grove. It was not his intention to trespass. He was in search of a rare herb that grew only under one of the trees in the secret grove. He was told only that herb could cure Prince Ibuna. King Adago's royal guard accompanied him to the forest that day. Both of them moved cautiously, whispering prayers as they entered the grove. After a while, an antelope appeared from nowhere and tried to attack the king. Instantly, King Adago, a skilled hunter before he became the king, drew a spear with his left hand and threw it with precision. The spear went straight into the antelope's head, killing the animal instantly. The king was surprised when the antelope fell down and spilled blood on the secret grove. A dreadful silence followed. The air grew heavy and the sky darkened, as if the gods themselves had witnessed the sacrilege. The king was very sad, not only because of the sacrilege, but also because he couldn't find the herb there that day. News of the sacrilege spread like wildfire. Panic gripped the kingdom. The council of elders convened an emergency meeting. Some demanded the immediate execution of the punishment to appease the gods, while others argued for leniency. Suddenly, King Adago got ill, and attempts to cure him failed woefully. Now, with the king so sick, while Prince Ibuna's health deteriorates, Queen Aroko became very confused and scared. In an attempt to save the situation, the queen visited Akokoloko, the great herbalist who lived in the forest. She knelt before him and said with her voice trembling, "Wise one, my son is—" "I know your son is very sick, as well as your husband," interrupted Akokoloko. "Yes, please, we need your help. Please tell me what I must do to save them," the queen said in a very sad tone. Akokoloko consulted the secret cowries while pouring out incantations, after which his expression changed. "My queen," he began, "there's only one remedy. You alone must bring the forbidden leaf from the secret forest." The queen was surprised. Everyone in that village knew of the secret forest, a mystical place protected by powerful spirits, and no one was allowed to go there except the chief priest. "You know it's forbidden," the queen said, her heart pounding. "Is there no other way?" Akokoloko shook his head and then said, "The forbidden leaf holds the power to cleanse their souls and heal their bodies, but it comes with a price. If you truly love your husband and your son, then you must dare to face the wrath of the gods." For a moment, the queen hesitated, trying to choose between her duty to the gods and her love for her family. Suddenly, she stood tall, with her mind heavily made up. I am Queen Aroko. If the gods must punish me, so be it. I will do anything to save my dear husband and my beloved son. That night, under the cover of darkness, the queen wore a simple cloak and sneaked out of the palace. The path to the secret forest was so scary. It was lit only by the pale light of the moon. She could hear the scary sound of hoofs in the distance and the movement of leaves, which seemed like whispers warning her to turn back, but she continued with so much determination. She got to a point where a heavy wind started blowing, but she wasn't discouraged. The thought of saving her dear ones kept her going. She continued till she got to the edge of the forest. At that point, her heart started pounding again, but she stepped forward even when each footstep felt heavier than the last. Deep within the forest, Queen Oroko found the forbidden tree with its leaves glowing as if they held the very essence of life. She stretched her hand towards the leaves, and that was when a loud voice filled the air. Who dares disturb the sacred forest? The queen fell to her knees. Great spirits, please forgive me, she cried out. I come not for myself, but for my husband and my son, who are very sick. Please, let me take some leaves to save their lives. By then, the wind was only blowing gently around her, carrying voices that seemed to argue amongst themselves. Finally, the loud voice returned. You act out of love, but your actions defy the sacred laws. Take the leaves, but know this, your choice will bring consequences. With tears streaming down her face, Queen Aroko plucked some leaves from the tree. That moment, the air fell silent and was filled with uncertainty. As Queen Aroko held the forbidden leaves tightly in her hands, the glowing tree behind her dimmed, and the forest grew eerily quiet. Suddenly, strange shadows began to move between the trees. Tall, thin figures with glowing red eyes. They whispered in voices that sounded like wind and thunder. One of them stepped forward and asked in a slow, echoing voice, Why should the Queen of Ngolo walk free after breaking the sacred law? The queen dropped to her knees, trembling. Please forgive me. I acted out of love, she said softly. My son and my husband are dying. You know how dear they are to me. I had no choice. I need to save them. The shadows circled around her like a slow storm. Their whispers grew louder and angrier. Then, a glowing figure of a woman appeared. She was dressed in ancient robes, with her feet not touching the ground, and her voice so gentle. Enough, she said with so much authority. The shadows stopped moving, and the whispering stopped. She looked at Queen Oroko and said, I am Omama, the spirit of mercy. Your heart is pure, but your path is not without pain. Your intentions are genuine, but there are consequences ahead. Tears rolled down the queen's cheeks. Will my husband and my son live? She asked. Yes, replied Omama. But know this, the law you broke is tied to the life of the land. Unless something greater is done, your kingdom will suffer. Then, as quickly as they came, the spirits disappeared. The forest grew still again. Queen Aroko stood up slowly, her legs weak, her heart heavy with the words of the spirits. She held the leaves close to her chest and whispered, Please, let this be enough. And with that, she began her long, fearful journey back to the palace. By the time she returned to the palace, The king's condition had worsened, and the prince could barely open his eyes. With trembling hands, she gave one of the leaves to the king and said, "Take, my husband, chew it. It will bring you instant healing." The king followed her instructions. He chewed the leaf completely while she was looking at him with tears in her eyes. In an attempt to complete the mission, Queen Oroko ran over to the prince. She was scared because by that time, the prince looked so pale he could neither move nor speak. She tried to give him the leaf, but he could not take it. She became very nervous and scared. It was much later that Queen Oroko thought about squeezing out the juice from the leaf before giving it to her son. She stepped into action the moment the idea came to her. With trembling hands, she squeezed some juice out of the leaf and poured it into Prince Ibuno's mouth. The moment the juice got into his mouth, color returned to his cheeks, and then he sneezed. Shortly later, Prince Ibuna opened his eyes and got up from the sick bed. That was when tears of joy filled Queen Aroko's eyes. By the next morning, the news of Queen Aroko's actions had gone around the kingdom. Everyone was sad, even though the king and the prince were completely healed, and it seemed the gods had forgiven them. Gradually, rain stopped falling, and a huge drought took over the Kingdom of Ngolo. It was a very difficult time for the villagers, because even the hunters and fishermen were not finding it easy. One morning, a hunter was returning back from the forest when he met his friend on the way. "You look worried," said his friend. "Yes, I'm worried because I don't understand what is going on," replied the hunter. "I went hunting all night, but couldn't catch even a cricket." By that time, a fisherman was also complaining to someone by the river bank. "I went fishing all night, but it seems every fish in this river went on vacation," the fisherman said, filled with frustration. "I couldn't catch even the smallest of them all. This is very strange. I'm sure there's a problem somewhere." Indeed, there was a big problem in the Kingdom of Ngolo, and so the Council of Elders called for a very crucial meeting. "The law must stand," one of the elders said the moment the meeting started. "If not, the gods will punish us all. The king and his queen must die. They have done the unthinkable," an elder said in disappointment. "My people, if we execute the bloodline of the royal family, who will lead us?" asked another elder. "Who will be our king? Will the gods rule in the king's place?" "We will never compromise the tradition of our land," replied an angry-looking elder. "The king committed a sacrilege, and he must die. The queen had broken her tradition. She must pay for it." And so the kingdom was divided, because some people wanted the law to be enforced, while others cried for mercy. The river that fed the kingdom started to dry up, and it became obvious that the gods were displeased. King Adagu summoned the council of elders to his palace one morning. His wife, Queen Aroko, was sitting at the extreme of the palace. Her face seemed calm, but her eyes betraying her fears. "My lord and elders," said the king, "I am not above the law, neither is the queen. We admit that what we did was very wrong, but we ask for mercy. If my bloodline must perish to save the kingdom, I am prepared to meet my fate, but I beg for pardon." "You speak wisely, your majesty," said one of the chiefs, "but the law binds us all, even you and the queen." "Then we must ask ourselves," said King Adagu, "do we rule the law, or does the law rule us? Shall we let our people die for a law that punishes without mercy?" "Your majesty, no one is above the law," an elder said with all seriousness. "Let's not bring calamity to our children and our children's children." "Yes, I understand what you mean," "But I didn't do it on purpose," said the king. "It was an act of self-defense. The queen had to do what she did just to save us. It's so unfortunate. I wish the gods can take the lives of those guilty of the crime and spare our innocent children." That day, King Adagun tried to convince the elders, but his words were not good enough for all of them to be convinced. It appeared they already made up their minds. Queen Aroko heard the entire conversation. Her heart became so heavy and her eyes were filled with tears. She could see that the condition was beyond the king's control. Finally, King Adagun agreed to be executed, and so a day was set aside for the historical event. The night before the king and his bloodline were to be executed, the skies wept. A rainless thunderstorm roared across Ngolo, shaking rooftops and causing birds to flee their nets. In the dead of the night, while the palace slept under sorrowful silence, an old woman appeared at the palace gates. Her back was bent like a withered tree, and her eyes glowing faintly with a light that seemed not to come from this world. She called herself Mama Juku, the last surviving daughter of the family who recorded the ancient laws of Ngolo. No one had seen her in over 50 years. Rumors said she had disappeared into the secret grove to live with the spirits, but now there she was, knocking on the palace gates with nothing but a walking stick. When the guards saw her, they hesitated. "I carry no weapon," she said, her voice fragile but echoing with strange authority. "But I carry the truth and a cry from the past." "You can't go in now," said one of the guards. "Please, come back in the morning." "Out of my way!" Mama Joko tried to scream, but her voice was barely above a whisper. Queen Aroko, unable to sleep that night, heard the commotion and rushed to the gate herself. The moment she saw Mama Joko, their eyes locked, one full of pain, the other full of purpose. "Take me to the king," said Mama Joko. Instantly, the queen ordered for the old woman to be taken to the king. Inside the palace, King Adago sat quietly as he awaited the strange visitor. When Mama Joko entered the palace chamber, the flames in the room flickered, almost bowing to her presence. "I come with a message from the past," she said to the king. The king watched with anxiety as the air grew tense while the room seemed to hold his breath. "There is a law," continued Mama Joko, "written by the first king of Ngolo and sealed by the gods through the chief prince of that era. It has been hidden for ages, buried beneath tradition and lost in time." Mama Joko paused as the king leaned forward before she continued. "In the season when love and necessity collide, the gods will send a sign. If ever blood is spilled in the sacred grove, not by greed, but by courage to save a life or kingdom, let the heart be cleansed, not punished. For the gods are not blind to love, born of sacrifice." Queen Aroko was filled with shock. The king stood slowly, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Is this real?" asked the king. Mama Joko stared at him and then said, "This law was hidden away to keep power in the hands of fear. Your ancestors knew that laws without mercy would one day strangle the entire kingdom. Yes, this is real." A heavy silence fell over the room. For a moment, even the thunder outside seemed to stop. Queen Aroko looked at the king and then whispered, "Does that mean we don't have to die?" The king could not speak. His throat tightened with emotion. He turned to Mama Joko and asked again, "But why now? Why haven't no one said anything about this in the past? Why are you telling me now?" The woman smiled faintly. Because the gods were watching, responded Mamajuku. When a leader is ready to die for his people, then he should live for them. The gods waited to see if your heart was ruled by pride or by love. By dawn, the king summoned the elders and chiefs of the land to his palace. He gave them the message from Mamajuku, but most of them never believed. I can see the king is trying to manipulate the tradition of our land, said an angry-looking elder. Yes, it won't work, another elder said with anger before he was interrupted by one of the chiefs. My king, there is no need going back and forth. Remember, you are the custodian of our tradition. We will forever uphold the tradition of our land. After this meeting, King Adago never tried to defend himself again. He was ready to accept whatever that comes his way. On the day of the execution, the villagers were gathered at the village square, with the king and his bloodline at the middle of the crowd, awaiting the execution. Tension was high, and the sadness on everyone's face could not be hidden. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the crowd. I have a question for you. If you wipe away the bloodline of a king, who then shall rule over you? Everyone looked towards the direction of the voice, but they couldn't find the one who had just spoken. It was an indication that the gods themselves had spoken. Suddenly, a fierce wind started blowing through the village square. The air, once heavy with anticipation, became filled with confusion. Leaves and palm fronds flew into the sky, swinging like angry spirits in the air. The villagers shielded their faces from dust as they stumbled back in confusion. The village elders exchanged uneasy glances. No doubt, it was a sign from the gods, a warning that the gods were displeased with what was about to take place. By the time the wind finally stopped blowing, the chief priest was already in their midst. The gods demand respect, not blind obedience, said the chief priest. If we abolish the law and offer a great sacrifice of atonement, perhaps the gods will forgive. There is no need for any execution. The entire villagers screamed in agreement, not just because of their love for the king, but also because of the circumstances surrounding the execution. It was at the village square that day that they reached a decision and a royal decree was issued. The ancient law of sacrilege was abolished. Instead, the kingdom would observe a week of atonement, during which sacrifices of grain, livestock, and prayers would be offered to the gods. The chief priest led the ceremonies, imploring the gods for forgiveness. For 7 days, different activities were done for the atonement. As the final sacrifice was made, the skies cleared, the rivers flowed again, and the land blossomed with new life. It seemed the gods had accepted their sacrifices. King Adogo's family was spared, and the kingdom thrived once more. The people learned a valuable lesson that day. While laws are necessary to maintain order, they must always reflect justice and compassion. That year, a festival was declared to mark a new beginning in the Kingdom of Ngolo. The villagers gathered together on different days to celebrate the kingdom in a grand style. They danced, they ate, and drank together as one big family. One day, as King Adago sat under a tree with Prince Ibuno, who was now 10 years old, the little boy said, "Father, do you think the gods were truly angry with us?" The king smiled and then replied, "Perhaps they were, my son, but the gods are not beyond reason. Like us, they must see the truth in mercy." And so, the kingdom of Ngolo flourished, guided not just by only laws, but also by the wisdom to change them whenever the need arises. Indeed, they came to realize that the laws are for the welfare and well-being of the people, but not to subject people to unnecessary pain, misery, and grief. The story of King Adago was told as a lesson of wisdom, sacrifice, understanding, genuine love, and good leadership. The story was told from generation to generation. It was a story which inspired a lot of people within and outside the Kingdom of Ngolo. For more interesting stories, kindly subscribe to this channel. Please like, share, and comment on our videos.